Peace and love, family. Black first. I am DJ Joker, and you're watching Historical Origins Part 3. Before we get into this video, I just want to say thank you to all the supporters, all the love I've been getting, and people who have really been taking the time out to listen to the series and understand what's going on and what I'm really trying to do. But again, Part 3 is going to be heavy, but not as heavy as Part 4. If you guys are new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and that way you can be up to date. And when you say hit the subscribe button, make sure you turn the bell icon on. That way whatever I upload will ping you immediately, and you'll know when I drop a video, and you can watch it right then and there, or you can choose to watch it later. So if you aren't getting that and you want to know how to get the notifications, or there's some kind of issue, just reach out to me, IG, Twitter, email me, or comment on this video, and just make sure you're getting this content. So again, thank you for watching. Everybody, I'm excited. I'm excited about what we're going to talk about today because it's important. And again, if you have not watched part 1 or part 2, go ahead and check those out, and take your time with it, because once you get all the knowledge that I'm giving you and you put it together, it's really going to make sense, and this stuff is really going to be eye-opening, and you can start your journey to a new direction and thinking different, in the world that we are today. So I'm not going to overtalk it. We got a lot to go over, so let's get right into it. This is Historical Origins Part 3. All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm not going to hold you long. Thanks again for watching. So I want to hop back on this slide real quick because this is important. We talked about in part 2 how the last glacial period, or the last heating and cooling period of the ice shields that covered pretty much every continent at some time. Africa was the first continent to basically be fully uncovered because, again, it is the only continent that lays in all 4 hemispheres, and it's perfectly, the equator goes perfectly right through it. So you have the heat element there, almost the center of the world, if you will, or the world that we know. So you're going to have Africa be wide open at this time. So this is up to 25,000 years ago that this actually started occurring. And it took thousands and thousands of years for other areas to completely be uncovered. But if you look on the map here, even right now, North America is open, but I don't think humans had, yet traveled there. We're going to get to that point in time in which they did finally come out of Africa and reach the Americas. But it was open at this time. So that still is important, which means that we could have been there way long before of what history actually says. And then when you look at South America, it's open too, but there is still some ice there. You have parts of Asia and India that is open, and you have parts of Australia that is open. So I believe at this time, life had already been here well over, 200,000 years from, again, what science says. I believe that we've been here longer, but if you give man 200, 300,000 years, amongst other man, the development of those people are going to take off. And eventually, I feel like that at some point we tried to cross the sea. We know of certain continents and certain pieces of land that used to exist that are no longer there. That's factual, so at some point early on, I believe that Africans were creating boats and trying to reach other continents that they could see with the naked eye. So this is important because this lets you know life is way ahead and moving way more faster than any other place that life could be at this time. And so we've already pinpointed it, the Africans of the Nile Valley, coming along the Nile, basically using that like a cultural highway, and really just populating all throughout Africa. And they are going to go into these other places in Europe and into the Middle East. And before you get the Black Sea, the Red Sea, the Mediterranean seas in this little hub, all right there in the Middle East, Africans would cross and go over there. That's how they ended up there. And that's how you can find the DNA evidence and everything there linked. So we were very, very active people. You had nothing else to do but travel. And I mentioned too in part 2 that we watched animal herds. Animals are going to go where water is, where resources, especially elephants. Elephants are one of the most smartest, land animals, known to mankind. And the behavior of it, and various other animals that can only be found in Africa, will lead you to civilization and lead you to survival. So it's very important to be one with nature. And again, those tribes that were the closest to nature and understood it how it worked, these would be, the strongest nations and strongest communities of black people that again will form all up and down the Nile Valley. And we talked about all these groups here, but these are some of the original names, some of the old names that you can find. And there's a lot of history there. And some of you have never heard of these, but I had to just say it again before we get to, Kemet in Egypt. You had all of this, all of these great nations coming together and really taking life to the next stage and working together in a community. And here you go again, starting with ancient Kush, ancient Kosh, to Ta-Netcher and Ta-Kui and Ta-Neseti and Ta-Seti and Ta-Meri. You can actually find Ta-Meri up into the time of the Abydos Kings list, and them saying there about the nation and talking about the previous nations and what was kind of going on. And we're going to get into that shortly. So the thing that I have to point out is that when we talk about the start of something, we're talking about language, launching a civilization or structures or monuments, landmarks, pinpointing that the people were there. So the biggest thing that we have to start with and we can't overlook with is the Sphinx. But if you think like me, then you're going to say Haru and Maketi or Ra Hormakit. And scholars use both names, black scholars. And it's okay to use either other one. I like saying Haru and Maketi just because it's more common. But this is what it is, the Sphinx, this colossal structure built by Africans, not by aliens. And what does it represent? Why is it here for? And the thing is, a lot of scholars say that this statue could be, 12,000 years old, 20,000 years old, but it's believed to be much older because of the water damage from the last glacial period is dated, on the structure. So that tells you just about how old it is. And the thing that we also have to understand is what it means. People see the face of a head on the lion's body, but one way you can look at that is keeping your human instincts and your human nature above all animalistic instincts in nature, because we have that. We have some of those characteristics in us. And if you are in Africa, the strongest bad thing is the lion. So the human of this human experience has to be over the lion to conquer all. So that's one way of symbolism. I've heard people also say that the face could actually be of a woman, and that it is of a Twa, which makes sense being the last people. We talked about the Twa, we talked about the Sand people being the good spark to all of those, Nile Valley civilizations that we just named. And that this face could be the head of a Twa, the last high priest, and that's why that they were deified from the time when they were still in power. Now you might say, well, the Twa weren't around when you get to the Kemetic dynasties, but I'm going to show you something when we get into the calendar to prove that this structure is way older and that they were preparing for the age of Leo. That's what the lion also has to deal with. And when you look on the Giza Plateau, the Sphinx has 12 statues in front of it, kind of like a calendar, but resembling the 12 zodiac signs again, right on the plateau. And so we know that this is set and is built for the structure of Leo the lion. Now, I like to use this chart here because, again, it kind of proves what I just said about the statue being older than what a lot of people think it is. Because if it has water damage from the last glacial maximum, which is, okay, like we said, 14,000 BC, it probably stopped and could have started around 25,000 BC. So if you look on the chart, this is probably, let's just say, roughly in the age of Aquarius, back then, going into Capricorn, somewhere around there. They're saying that the water damage could be that old. So that just tells you how far along we were on our way, and that building the pyramids would be nothing, because again, Leo, if it's built in the constellation of Leo, well, from the time that it was built, you don't have Leo until, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, almost 10,000 years later. So that statue could have been there 10,000 years before the constellation even hit. And I hope all of you got that. If not, look at the chart and really break that down and process what I'm saying, that these Africans were well on their way. and advanced technology of just building and sculpting. Again, being at a high priest level, this is something that we carried out. So you just got to understand. Now, something that I want to point to is the Nile River flooding. This is something that constantly happening, and this is a big part of why Egypt would become more fertile, or land that was, better for the community, or they made it. One of the kings would eventually dig out kind of like a canal area to let the water go in during the flooding seasons. But this was big because this is how you knew, the harvest times and all that, broken down in three different phases. So the first phase would be Aket, which is indentation. The second phase would be Peret, which is the growth. And the third phase, Shemu, is the harvest. So this is what we were doing and watching, as the Nile did different things. And again, once you have water always constantly moving, you create and basically expand land, and it changes. And it changes the areas around you. So the intake of the water, and then the outtake of it. So the top and the bottom. So this is something that was very important, and it was very cultural to the Egyptians, the ancient Kemetics, all of those people, because this had to do with the harvest. So even from this side of things, the seasons were all different. The calendars were all different, for that side of the world. Because again, you're dealing with a continent that sits in all four hemispheres, the only one in the equator going perfectly through it. We talked about that in probably part one. So the rising and the flooding of the Nile is just, again, nature's way of harvesting the land and helping out the people. Now, we talk about floods, and everybody knows about the Great Flood, or the Great Flood of the Bible. Well, this is, again, a common thing that got rolled into, the stories and the traditions of the ancient Africans along the Nile, because of the flooding of the Nile, and also them living through the flooding of this area right here, the Mediterranean Sea, and the area of the Black Sea. So there's something called the Black Sea Deluge. And this is well known that the Black Sea even had its flooding experience and things like that, and affected those people and the people that were around there. And mind you, those people that were around there are all from Africa. Again, you follow water, you follow it where it goes, and it's always a source, in the migration. And again, the sea in ancient times didn't really exist. There was land there before all of this flooded. So you had people that had long went there and, pretty much got isolated because of what the water was doing. So this is no secret of flood stories pretty much coming up. And I have here, if you've already read ahead, we're going to bust this wide open real quick, because these are real things. So the Bible, the projected dates of biblical creation is around 4000 BCE, 404 BCE. Well, we know that can't be true if that is the start of mankind, or you believe in the Adam and Eve story and that creation story. That can't be true for Africans, because Haru and Makedi was already built. And I hope you guys get that. You're talking about two separate histories. So that history is okay, 400,000 BC, to describe a different set of people who we're going to get into later, who basically come in and cause the downfall of what was going on in Africa. But not Africans. That's not our story. So how could you have creation in 4000 BCE and the projected birthday of Noah, and this isn't me saying this, again, this is history, I've researched all this, is about 2446 BCE. The guy with the flood and the animals and all of that. Well, the flood date is projected at 2348 BCE. The flood day of after creation, Noah, the survivors, all of that stuff. You guys know the story if you're a Christian, or I hope you know the story. Well, if that was the case, Noah would have been about 98 years old at the time of the Great Flood. Now, for some of you, that might not have hit, but the point is, can you imagine a 98-year-old man herding all these different species of animals? Animals eating each other, killing each other, because that's what they do, especially the hunters and the predators, and putting them in the boat, doing all of this and doing this mission successfully. Now, I know that some of you are thinking, well, Noah lived hundreds of years or whatever they say. Get out of here. You had some of the greatest Egyptians, in health and yoga and all of these other practices and really into the chakras and things like that and working with the body and diet. And some of them didn't live, that long or longer than we do now, just because the time period was different, and all of that. So it's hard for me to believe that a 98-year-old man successfully did this mission. So some of you who are into the fairy tale, I'm not trying to be offensive, but you really need to be thinking about this. The Great Flood story is something that it's always happened. It just wasn't one time. So these people of this area around the Black Sea would use this story as their creation of their lineage, starting that because it's something that always occurred. But again, they get that from Africa. So I hope a lot of you got that. If not, read the slide. So I want to address something real quick. A lot of my Hebrew brothers talk about, cuneiform and all that, the cylinder seals of ancient Samaria, and I do acknowledge them that they did exist. And I even have it right here, 3500 BC, that some of these are dated back to, at least that's what archaeologists and science will tell you. Part of it, I believe, is to give validity of the people in this area. But you got to understand again, when writing gets to its peak, which we're going to get into, which is the Medu Neter or hieroglyphics, it doesn't look like this. And we know that those Africans, were in this area. I believe that this is a preform of what would come in the Egyptian writing system because there's three different types and we're going to get into those. But I believe that this area, these seals were more commonly found in this area because the people over there were isolated after these floods, after this time, because some of these dates of when this is going on is going to line up with that and the changes of sea level, and this becomes that culture and that style. Kemet never, had anything like this to the point where it stayed that way. You're going to see this type of writing and this style long in the Middle East than it was in Africa. So for those of you who are saying, oh, cuneiform predates the Medu Neter, well, it might, but again, look at what we're talking about. You're talking about the same people. And I believe that those Africans, came up with this system. And this is what was being spread at the time in both lands, in both nations. But this is going to remain over there. And the hieroglyphics and the Medu Neter is going to be solely meant to be, in Egypt, or the telling of that story. So this is kind of what I talked about when you have all of the Medu Neter pictures. This is basically your alphabet in ancient times. Okay. Some of this is 100% accurate. Some of this has been altered a little bit from the old languages. When you talk about, you know, Egypt before Egyptology and everything like that. But for the most part, you have, your alphabet. So this is something that we were doing. And that's the thing about cuneiform and the people of that area. There's nowhere where you can find the alphabet at this time, or anything that you could align and say that it was an alphabet at that time. There's nothing besides the cylinder scrolls and, the cuneiform tablets and things like that, but nothing concrete, nothing flowing. You have all of these parts, and people say they've been transferred, they've been, and not transferred, but deciphered and things like that, which some of it has to the linguistics experts and things. But, come on, guys. This is going to become perfection of what we see. It's going to become an art. It's going to be part of the sacred craft, the sacred language, and it's almost perfect if you really understand what you are looking at. And you have the writing over here, so is also, a different style. So some people think it's just the pictures, it's the animals. No, it this is one version, this is the second version, and then there's a third version. So you have to understand that, so these people again were very learned. And this is what starts your culture when you have writing. When you have writing telling stories and writing doing things, you can't find that in the Middle East at this time. So this is again something that kind of debunks the whole creation story of the Bible, because I just told you that the flood was, 20 300, 2400 BC, whenever I said it was. But the fact is, it's after the Abydos Kings list. And for those who are familiar with this, then you know what I'm saying. The Abydos Kings list is basically what's going to start the kings of Kemet. So the United Two Lands, once we get there, this kings list is going to start it. And again, all in stone, all factual, and you're going to get the names and the rulers. And you have like 70 different kings, 70 different families rule before the flood story in the Bible. So again, I hope some of you guys are really processing this information. So that cannot be the source of creation, So you could really stop right there, but some people are like, they just don't get it. They're not ready to let that go. And this isn't about letting it go. It's about you understanding that it is a story. This is not your actual life, So I've chosen to do historical origins to properly educate people. And I don't know everything, but when you start digging and you start getting the right history and you go to the source and you go to what was before something else, you can only run into truth. And all of that truth comes out of the Nile Valley. And we're going to point out how every culture after that, they go to it, they jock it, but they never give it the credit. You always have to give the great mother the credit. So you got the King's List. 3150 BCE, which is pretty ancient. And again, you had kings before that, but this is the united, land. This is what's going to be found in the Mirkut Sabiat, or the pyramid text, we'll say. And this is when the pyramids are going to have writing on them. And the pyramid of Unis is one of the earlier ones that is going to come up with the writing, with the spiritual system and all of that, and talking about, astrology and talking about, the holy union, or the holy trinity, Asar, Aset, and Haru. You're going to find all of that in the pyramid text in the temple of Unis, and everything that was going on. So this is the spiritual system that outdates anything. So I don't get how people could hold on to the Bible when it doesn't predate this. Well, some people will say, well, that ain't you. That's not your people. How do you know you're tied to those people? We're tied to the lineage. We're tied to the DNA of the ancient Africans. And when the further you pull back, we're clamping down to the people who have done it all before any other nations. When you get to the original strongest nation, you have to come here. Again, other nations before it, but I'm talking about the power, the pinnacle that taught the world and everybody pulled from. If it wasn't important, you wouldn't have everybody pull from it. The Bible mentions Egypt and all that, but it shames it and stays out of there because they don't want you to know that this is the greatness. This is where you come from. This is where the ancestors come from, everything. So it's very important. So nevertheless, we get the first golden age, founded by Narmer. This is great Nasut here that a lot of you know, reigned 3150 to about 3100. This is the first Neb Karu, the Lord, the King of Kings. This is the Nasut Biti, we would say, not Pharaoh. Again, this right here, perfect statue, preserved, perfect or what it could be. I guess I'm saying it's perfect just because I know it's a black man. And you have to understand that we took the time to learn the craft, to do these things and acknowledge our people. And some people just shy away with it. And that's the thing about the Middle East and all of these nations we're going to get into. I'm going to get into all of them. Trust me. There are no great artifacts. There's nothing that you can show us from there. All of the Hebrews, other than it being, the religion in these people. And I'm going to show you exactly where they come from. I'm going to show you their origins, but there's nothing great. You can go to Egypt today and still see things standing, preserved for you to understand and know the truth of where everything comes from. Some of you may not care, but I care about this because we have to get from up under the thumb of religion. You have to. Now, some of you people are like, why do you want to do that? Why are you ragging so hard? No, it's about legacy. It's about building people who think for themselves. It's about building better community. It's about building better economics. It's about keeping the blockers that are not real and that were made by people who don't look like you, made for you to follow. Like some people, you'll get that in the morning, but we're going to keep going here. So this is just to show paintings and again structures. It's no secret these are black people, but the workers and how these people were proud of the crafts, and everybody was teaching everybody. If you lived in Egypt along the Nile, people did work, the children did work. It was a community, it was a culture. There was none of this ratchetness stuff you see today. Totally different society of just people coming together for the common goal and making sure that they are building and leaving a legacy, and just taking care of one another. So you clearly see here people were always at work, and I like these pictures just because you can see how happy the people were about serving the king. But when you serve the king, you serve Amun Ra, and when you serve Amun Ra, you serve the people of Amun Ra. So again, you have to understand that. If you don't, watch part 1 and part 2. Cheap plug. So again, this is a common photo out there just showing you different shades of blackness or Africanness that was in Kemet and along the Nile. The Nubian or the Egyptian or the South African or the Middle Eastern African. So you had a different color and a different shade, sometimes a different look, but mainly by the garments you could tell where the people were from for what they were. But the main thing is that you see that everybody was coming in there. Everybody was working and moving because it was the source. It was the source of everything. And we know today that no continent will survive without Africa. So that's the key. So everybody had to come here. It's like a main attraction, a main event. The paintings and all of that in tombs, as you see, just the greatness of what we were doing and the type of art, that we took up. And again, these were skill sets that people took pride in learning and making sure that we were able to express the stories and what we were trying to say. But if you don't understand it or you don't try to understand it, then it's just going to look like scribble. But no, this is great preserved history right here. This is Black history, and another reason why I'm doing it for Black History Month. So we get to these great pharaohs right here. Kasich, Kimwe, kind of hard to say, and Dozier. And as you see the ages, again, lived these kings also well before the Great Flood. So come on, guys, we got to stop it with this Noah's mess. And I'm going to show you where they took the whole idea of the boat around that time. So we got them. We've already got this thing in the bag. I just hope you guys are really making sense of this and getting what I'm saying. So you have these two great kings here, and under Dozier comes Imhotep, not the mummy from the movie, who they the movie was okay, for a movie, but they disrespected Imhotep, and they didn't keep true to what he was really about. This is a real person who worked under Pharaoh Dozier, who I just showed you, and Imhotep is credited for the step pyramid. This is his idea. This is his genius, coming in at a time, 2680 BC. What was that? 2649 BCE. So 2649 BC is roughly, the time then when this got built. So again, I showed you the people working in the community, in the nation, helping in. This is what you had. And when you have, millions of people back then coming in, staying, learning, it's nothing to get, something built or these structures built or people doing it for money, doing it for pay. We like to talk about they were slaves and Egyptian slaves. No, that was not our thing. Slavery is going to come later in, and I'm going to show you, some of the original forms of slavery and when that started to take place and who were the first slaves. But it wasn't us enslaving our own people, to degrade them, to strip them of their lineage, to strip them of their culture, their language, none of that, so we would have hired help. People would get paid. People would get compensated because you had families. Most of these people had families. It's like going to work, for the job now, but people would go to the main city and work and help out on the projects and help on that. And people would get compensated with food, trading skills and other that. And you still had schools and universities going on at this time. The city of Thebes, I think maybe comes in a little bit later, but nevertheless, Thebes is really Waset, one of the biggest, universities and learning institutions at that time. So these people were way ahead of the curve. And y'all want to talk about some Noah putting some animals out? Show me something like this that they did, then I could believe something. But if it sounds like fairy tale, guys, it's probably fairy tale. And then right after Dozier, we're going to get into Seneferu, which is one of my favorites just because I love the name Seneferu. So around 2613 BCE, Seneferu is credited for the Bent Pyramid. So him and his Grand Vizier or Grand Mason, Grand Builder, Grand Architect would come up with the Bent Pyramid here. And some people say that the Bent Pyramid and the Step Pyramid is actually built after the Great Pyramids of the Giza Plateau. And they say that because, again, they're so perfect, and they're saying that these people who built the Step Pyramid and the Bent Pyramid, they tried to recreate what they saw on the Giza Plateau but could not do it. And so that's why they don't look the same. It's BS. Again, when you have people who are coming in helping with the culture and pitching every day hours, and people even working at night, you can build the pyramids of the Great Pyramids in the reign of a king or in the reign of two kings, and you know get that these great structures. So no, this is not nothing alien built. These are built by black people, we know that. And then next you have her Tefris. Some of these names is hard to pronounce, but the first, nevertheless, this beautiful sister here was one of the queens of Seneferu. We don't have a picture of her, but this black and white photo is the actual tomb that they found. And they found these things inside of her tomb, reigning back to this time. But this sister had a lot of power. For my black women out there, maybe you guys can look into her. A lot of us know about Hatshepsut, but I'm going to get into a couple other queens just so we can continue to do our research and empower those black female queens and never forget, the things that they did throughout history too as well. So I had to throw that in there. Now we get to this royal family here, which is also another one of my favorite, starting with Pharaoh Khufu, and then his three sons are basically going to be the ones who create the Giza Plateau and give you this beautiful structure that has been synonymous with everything that we can think of throughout history, and it always comes up. The pyramid over and over again. Not aliens at all, built by this family of royal Nasuts, this great family of royal black leaders, here. So they're all going to do something and give great contributions to the Giza Plateau, but the pyramids are named after Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. The Jeffrey was I know he was a battle leader or like maybe a general or something like that. His reign wasn't really that long. It was kind of a filling the gap after Khufu and before Khafre came and took over. So don't know too much about him, but nevertheless, the other three are great, and they're going to give us, the Giza Plateau. Before I get to that, I just want to point out the Phoenicians. Now, a lot of us have heard about the Phoenicians and understand where they come from and know that they have ties to ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, all of that, and also that the language basically is side by side to what you see in the Nile Valley. Now, the Phoenicians are again Africans, mixture of Nubians, Cushites, Sudanese, all of these tribes that are pretty much gonna push the borders under these kings that I just talked about, and these borders are gonna really take over Northern Africa, as you see right here, and start going more into Europe and going into the Middle East, into these areas, serving these people and trading with these people. So in 2500 BC, this is when, that starts to happen, kind of under the reign or towards the end of reign of these kings. You have great rise in population of people around here bordering Egypt, because again, this was the center of everything, and they had a head start on all of these cultures and all of these civilizations that would basically be sustained later on. But we were supplying these people with food, with supplies, all of the iron ore and rubber and oil and gold and metal and all of these other things that you can get and pull out of the continent has been well known. We talked about that in part one, the mining of the original Africans in South Africa, 200,000 years ago. So that was no secret. This is just the height of where we were able to get everything out. So the Phoenicians are basically going to spring up out of Nile Valley civilization. and take over these areas right there. And you're going to have them settle in. And now you're going to have these Africans populate again Europe, which they've already made it to, and the Middle East, just moving in tribes, going out with land, going out for trade, going out for different things. And again, you're going to have this area. So I just want to put that in there because these people that are going to be created, from the border stretching or eventually, sorry, going to come in and attack Kemet. Not the Phoenicians, but the people that they create and the beggars and, dust buckets pretty much that are going to come in later on once they get their game together. We're going to get there. But I had to point that out. Now, back to the Giza Plateau. Again, family, these structures are colossal. Hopefully one day I will get to see them. That is my plan in the near future. I have to put my feet in the land of the spiritual ancestors, and just take it all in. So I can't wait till I get to do that journey. But nevertheless, again, these pyramids are going to be created under the reign, of Khufu and his sons. So you have the pyramid of Khufu, which is the Great Pyramid. Then you have the pyramid of Ben Kara and the pyramid of Khafre. And again, these structures are more than just pyramids. We're going to get into a little bit later of what they really were trying to do and the purpose of them. And I'm going to save all that for another video, so we'll kind of come back to that. But nevertheless, we have these structures, again, predating the Great Flood and all of the creation story that the Bible gives us. So there's a huge problem for those of you who believe in that and that this is legit, and we should never look to Africa because we have this book. No, we're going to keep breaking it down. So something to point out here, inside the Great Pyramid, you have what we call the King and Queen's Chamber. So basically that's just showing you the duality, the king and the queen, and giving, praise to both sides. And in the King and Queen's Chamber are various, the construction. When you go and really research the type of ingenuity and everything that went into making these and getting way down into these pyramids, it'll blow your mind. And for some of these, pulleys and staircases and all of that to be, kind of still intact is unbelievable. A lot of this have been savaged and, messed up, and they will only let you go in so far now because of all of just the vandalism that has happened. But the idea of what they were trying to do, and this is going to definitely be something that also has to deal with astrology. And if you look, here we are on this page right here, astrology lines up perfectly with the Great Pyramids. If you see the black and white photo here on the right, or at least my right, so it'll probably be your left, you see that statue with the stars pinpointing the shoulders and the waist, and then at the legs, that is Orion, or the statue of Orion that, the Bible speaks of. The stars aligned with Orion. This is where they get it from. It's clear, but that is not Orion. That is Asar, or what we would call Asar, and it became Orion. But as you see, his belt is aligned with the pyramids, and that's showing you that energy and that duality. And when you look over, you see the queen, which is Aset. We talked about Aset. You can find her in the stars too, which would be Sirius B. Okay, Sirius A and Sirius B. Sirius B would be Aset, Sirius A would be Asar. So you have these, great stars, the pairing. So as above, so below. And then you have the constellations recreating that. You have the King and the Queen's Chamber looking out of the pyramids to these constellations, as you see right here. And this is, again, you had to know what was going on in the heavens to map all of this out. And then to align the pyramids is perfect with it. The calculations with the stars. Some of you already know that. It's no secret now, but I'm just restating that again for my listeners to understand that. Like, that is not something that you do overnight. That's nothing a dummy can do. And again, there's no Middle Eastern culture that can do this. So why do we claim it? Why do we want to tie to it? All because of what religious doctrine says. And again, you guys are going to have to get out of that if you want to be hip to what's going on here, just so you understand it. So we talk about Khufu again. This is the boat, not Noah's boat, but this is where they got it from, family. Khufu's boat really existed. This is a real structure that had been, you know, de-earth and found and pulled out of the earth, and then they go and do like they do with everything else, put it in a museum. But nevertheless, it existed. This is real, and it's symbolic, okay? And so Khufu built the boat to symbolize the journey to his, father in the heavens. So as the Nile would flood, we talked about the flooding of the Nile, basically ascending through water to the heavens, so the celestial journey is symbolism. He knew this wasn't going to happen for real, but this is something to symbolize that journey and how the spirit would basically travel through water or through space, and can meet on the other side. So it's all symbolism. So this boat, this story is going to get butchered, it's going to get retold, and then it becomes Noah's Ark, which we have never found. But we found Khufu's boat. Again, family, it's not hard to see what's going on here. It's not hard to see the theft. Now, this is something that we must talk about and get into, because it's obviously with the pyramids and everything that was going on in stone structures, dating all the way back to South Africa, that we had an understanding of math. We had an understanding of symmetry, proportions, probably even fractions, I'm pretty sure, and just knew, these things from studying and from, one and one is two, and understanding the different things that you could come up with by doing math. We talked about the Ashango bone and all that. So you guys, math is nothing new under the sun, and the golden ratio is something that isn't new either. So the golden ratio, basically in math, two quantities are the golden ratio if the ratio is the same as the ratio of the sum or larger of the two quantities. So as you see, the spiral, you can find this in various forms of life right here, perfectly proportioned, to the waves, to the universe right there, to the fingerprint, to how the baby is in the womb, the seahorse. You see all of these things. So this is something that we knew, and I can prove that we know it again by the structure, and understanding, size proportions and everything like that. And when you get an overhead shot of the Giza Plateau, there it is again, the golden ratio. When we look at Haru and Maketi, there it is again. So that's math. So that is brilliant. So it's not shocking that this culture becomes a high culture, because again, remember, you want to elevate to the level of the high priest, meaning that you have done your work, you've done your time, and you are knowledgeable of self, and you are knowledgeable of the universe that you are in and how you are connected with it. Part one, we talked about you are connected to every domain, so again, this is something that you can't escape, but there's math behind it, and these Africans would figure that out. So I just think that that's brilliant, to do so. Even in every pharaoh head structure, you will find the golden ratio, you will find the math in it, and this is something Raphael would eventually copy, because again, they studied there or got with people who studied in Kemet later on, and they would steal all of this stuff. So the golden ratio is nothing new. This is something else that is not talked about enough, but it is the lighting, and the lighting that we used. People talk about, yeah, there were lighting tricks, and they had mirrors and they would do this in the sun, but it's hard for them to believe that they had electricity, but electricity was actually a thing. Okay, the lighting of the temples and the lighting of the natural sun was very big too, because of course that is the all source from Ra, so you would want that. And as you see here in the temples, in every temple, you will find the golden ratio with Ra coming in, and then also access of Ra lighting the temple and giving you lower level lights, and they would have the sun alone doing different tricks. So they were very big about that and the structure. Now this right here is critical, because this backs what I was just said about electricity. Now, as you see in the Medu Neter, You see the Egyptians holding up what is basically a light bulb, and you see the created or recreated structures, or these could probably even be real. I'm not sure or not if these are real from real digs, or they were recreated, but nevertheless they come from here. And you see how we got the light bulb. Now in the light bulb on the wall you see the snake, meaning energy, kundalini, all of this stuff. So this is just a sign and symbol basically. And you see here in the sand version of the Meta Nature, smaller ones, which leads me to believe that these were like handheld lights and things like that. And the reason that this has to be true, it has to be true, is because when you talk about all the structures and how deep they were going in tombs and pyramids and the paint and all of this stuff that is done inside underground in all of these places, you had to have light, and you had to have a lot of it. And lighting tricks are just not going to get it done. Not torches aren't going to get it done. You would have, oil burns and spills and fires and things like that would probably be dangerous. The soot would stain everything down underground that low. Matter of fact, when the Arab invaders came in, there are a lot of temples with soot damage and burn damage, because that's how they went in, with torches and things like that. And a lot of those people had bad accidents because they didn't know this. They didn't know the ancient lighting and how they got it to work. And, we still can't figure it out. But it's very important. And this staff here that you see that the light bulb is on or holding up is also, a symbol of energy and Osiris. As you see the Egyptians right here in the Meta Nature picking up the Jed. We call it the Jed. So it's like a pillar. And the pillar almost actually looks like modern day transformers or electrical towers. If you see right there, the brackets and things, that pretty much they copycatted from this. Um, so it gives a little bit more validity to believing that electricity definitely was a thing. But the Jed also represent, again, maintaining and being upright, like Osiris represents, and everything like that. So they associated with him, the ultimate father, giving and bringing you light, and through Osiris there is energy. So this is very symbolic of why they would use this, going on to do their different and various lighting tricks. And again, family, now this is just showing insides of tombs. Again, this is not electricity like I was just showing you. This is all modern day lighting. But look at the ceiling. Look at all of these paintings and things like that. It's worn now, but you're not going to be able to do these structures on the ceiling and things like that without electricity or proper lighting. You cannot do this with torches and things like that. So there had to be, more than just light. You're underground, hundreds and hundreds of feet, and you come out with beautiful artwork like this. So again, what I just showed you, this is where the light bulb is going to come from, or the invention of the idea, and basically reforming it and of something in that structure to give you light. So I just gave it to you. Now, this is just showing you again the temple building. This right here is the Temple of Man, and it's basically designed to resemble, my bad, man, from the head, from the body, and then the lower part of the body. And when you walk through each room, it kind of corresponds or is relative to the body, and also relative to chakra, to all of that kind of stuff and thinking. So each place that you would stop in the Temple of Man would have to do with man, and seeing and understanding, the secrets of man. All of that would be here. This is remnants of what's left of it. And again, old school buildings still standing. You have nothing like this in the Middle East, or all these people we claim came in, did things for the Egyptians and or whatnot. It's out of here. It's ludicrous. This is work by nothing but African people. Here's another structure of the Temple of Man, and what do you know? Look at this shot. These shots over here that are in color. This is St. Peter's Square in Vatican City. What do you know? The Vatican City's St. Peter's Square. Why would they copy the Temple of Man? Because that's where they stole it from. trying to do and create the same thing. And this is little talked about in Christian religion, Judaism, and all that, but yet they do it right here. So you see the outline of the Temple of Man goes perfectly over Vatican Square. And this is one of their holiest sites. So that shows you how long, they've been studying these people and pulling things in and taking parts of their culture and disguising it as their own. So you're caught clean as day. This is the obelisk. We all know about the obelisk. And again, the obelisk represents energy and a couple other things. It represents the resurrection of Osiris. And the story is the engravings of life and the journey and different things like that. But it's also symbolic of man, rising, you know what I'm talking about, and pretty much the sky or the heavens being the woman, and rising in the womb, which is going to procreate all of mankind. So it's symbolic, and it goes also along with the story, the resurrection story of Osiris and him impregnating a Set and, rising the nation through Haru and giving birth to all the Harus and so on and so on. And you already know there's an obelisk in Washington, D.C. This is where they stole it from, and they stole it for that reason because they understand, who has the oldest history. They understand that those people have the most genuine connections with God and the oldest ancestors as far back as you can go. So why wouldn't you want that history, in your nation? So that's why they copied it. But nevertheless, that comes from us. These are great structures you see in other places too, not just DC. So here, we have to talk about this, and we definitely have to address this. This is Merorucus Mastaba. I did a post about a year ago on IG about the Mastaba, and again, how old it is and what it is. And the Mastaba is basically your oldest, or one of your oldest Masonic temples. Okay. And the issue I have with the Masons is we don't talk about Merorucus Mastaba. We talk about all this other things and Solomon's temple and all of that, which we can't find. Solomon never existed, by the way. We're going to get to that too. So why aren't we talking about Merorucus Mastaba? You have to talk about this because the ancient Egyptians would go and study. So in Thebes and Luxor and all these other places, to become a grand master, you would have to study for 40 years. Do you hear what I'm saying? 40 years to become a high priest, which is almost all of your life. And we talked about the lifespans being short. So from the time that, kids were young, this is when you would get into that, as early as 10, 12 years old. So by that time you got into your 50s, or whatever, you could be a grand priest if you wanted to, but the studying starts young. And so how is it that we are birthing all of these Masons overnight, who have way less than half of the knowledge that we had back then? We could barely tell the correct story, and a lot of the Masons are tied also up in religion. And I know when you go into a lot of these lodges, they have every religious manual in there, and pretty much you just have to believe in God with them, or some kind of God. But my thing is, you have to give credit to where all of these different crafts come from. All of that, the apron, the square, the geometry, symbol, and all of that with the compass and square, that all comes from back here. You even have old depictions of, people playing chess, which would be called sonnet back then in the ancient language, written and depicted on the walls here in the Mastaba. All of this stuff here, you have your left leg forward, meaning that you will trample down evil that comes in the area of the heart, because the heart is on the left side, and that pose, left leg forward, is called the Kanesi Ansu, so that is the defense position, for evil. And you see the brother Meroruca right here doing the Kanesi Ansu, but inside of this temple you have 33 chambers. And honestly, family, that's where I believe, the European Masons get that from, 33 degree, because there are 33 rooms in the original, Masonic hall. We're talking about the Mastaba, nothing in America. We're talking about here. So if you are a Mason, you need to go study this history right here and really start thinking about where this comes from and who are the original masons and the grand masters who were building pyramids and things like that and all of these other temples. But yet you say that we talk about King Solomon and everything coming, from that end, and Knights Templar and all of these people. But where are your structures? Where are your temples? You They weren't feeding nations. Egypt was feeding nations. And there's a reason, because of what they knew and what they understood. This is King Teddy here, over here on the left. His reign started about 2323 BC. Another famous king. There's not a lot of pictures or statues of him, but we have this one here. And you have this famous staff that symbolizes Teddy. And you also have Pyramid of Teddy. Now, people could say, well, why does the Pyramid of Teddy look like this? Well, it's more of tomb, and I believe that there were other kings also buried in this tomb, or his people, and other things like that. But it's not like the Great Pyramids. And some people would argue and say that that knowledge was lost around this time, and you have a different people trying to now recreate that, but never could do it. But again, the reign of Teddy and the reign of the Khufu family is not that far off to where I can't believe that. So this was more so dedicated to be a tomb in an era and to symbolize that. The Pyramid of Teddy has a lot of different things going on with it. I'm not going to get too much into that. Now, we get to the second golden age, which is the coffin text. And this is the Karas Sabiat. This is the founder right here, this brother Menchu Hotep, one of my favorites. And I love that name. One of the names that I actually can pronounce right, Menchu Hotep. And there's a Kemetic priest that I've been following for years who has two great books on the second golden age and what was going on, brother Infadishi Jehudimas. And I encourage a lot of you, if you are into, ancient Egypt and Kemetic history and knowing some of this stuff more in depth and getting, it from the mouth of a Kemetic priest, because that's a rare title these days, check out brother Infadishi. He has classes that I plan on taking. Hopefully I can get into them this summer. And he teaches you how to read and write the Medunetra and speak the language of Kiswahili, which I know a lot of Africans still speak today, and so many other things. So I encourage you guys to go check that brother out. But nevertheless, you have Mentuhotep come in and founded the second golden age. So we are still at a great height and a good time in Egyptian history, and a lot of things are going on. But the dark days are getting ready to come, because you have almost empowered some of the invaders just by the trade and supplying resources, and really help feed these other nations and teach them and help them learn science and astrology, which a lot of the mythos and the stories and the creation stories, this is going to get pulled to so many different nations. This is why you have, your Hebrews saying one thing, your Christians saying the other thing, your Jews and Moors all saying that. But I guarantee when you come to the source, it all has to run through Kemet, because there is no other nation like this nation, and there hasn't been one since. So we were still at a good time doing here. But I like to get into Sumeria just a little bit, because we often talk about the ancient Sumerians, and I know a lot of people believe that this is the place of civilization and all that kind of stuff, and it actually started here, not in Africa, but that's further from the truth. We've already proven that. They tried to do that so much and push this area to give all of these Bible religious characters all the validity. You notice how nothing in Africa and west of Africa has to do with religion or religious doctrine or what you believe in. It's only when you get east of Africa and Europe and Asia and all over here in India and the Middle East that you get these man-made religions. And these are the very people that are going to come in and run Kemet into the ground. So it's not a coincidence that that happens. You have two versions of stories, and it's the reason why they do that, and we're going to touch on that. But nevertheless, you got the Sumerians Kings list, and on the Sumerians Kings list, which is factual, they talk about the first city over there in Sumeria being ancient Kish, which is also similar to Kush. That's not a coincidence. And they talk about it being formed after the Great Flood. Now, this is what the Kings List is saying, telling the story and then giving you the chronology of the kings in that area, which they did have kings, but this is more so Akkadian and, Babylonian times, okay? Is where it is. So 2600 BC, I kind of, don't think that is that old, but again, this is what they say, and I only say that because there's no hard artifacts by these kings left. There's no tombs of these kings. All you have is this documenting and telling you that. And I honestly feel that you can't find anything valuable, no structures, no tombs or anything like that, because these people were not it. They were trying to copycat of what was going on in the Nile Valley, but they didn't have the resources to do it. They wanted to have their own separate nation and do their own separate thing, which is why they drove so hard to give you all of the things that they're going to give you. Now, I want to move up or down, really, because we're moving down in chronology, and talk about Hammurabi, which is the sixth king of the first Babylonian dynasty, which is very important. Babylonian history, takes off because you can trace it a little bit more, and some of the actual people, you don't really find a lot of people who actually existed from this history, or what they tell you. All of these, Bible thumping book characters, you don't find any of these people before you get to Akkadian and Babylonian history. At least I don't. Artifacts of them being real, structures of them being real, you don't find anything of that. But you can find something on Hammurabi, and what he did for Babylonian culture. When you go and research it rather, this guy was like a god to these people because of what he was doing and all of the chaos that he was creating. But he was credited for creating the code or laws of Hammurabi, which are the rules and laws of punishment when it comes to living. His story is similar as the Moses story in the Torah. Now, those of you who are with me just caught that. Those of you who are trying to put all of this together are like, okay, so let's break this down. So, created the code or laws of Hammurabi. Laws, codes, sounds like Moses and what Moses got, the laws and codes, the covenant of God, So this guy right here is somebody who's real and actually created something that was structured around the living and then what his people should do. And the laws of Hammurabi, or Hammurabi, rabbi, whatever, key, wink, wink, rabbis. This is where they get rabbis from, writing code, preserving the law, retelling the story. It comes from Hammurabi. To me, that's game right there. And it clearly says that it's similar to the story of Moses in the Torah. Well, this predates where we get the Torah from. And I'm going to give you the date of where the Torah comes in. So you have this brother in the same region, glorified for what he did. This is y'all Moses right here. This is where they get the story from. So a person that is real, but not the one that they give you. So they take bits and pieces, but I strongly believe this is where they come from. And like I said, when I said rabbi, this is why the rabbi is at the head, or the one who holds the covenant or gives the law. That's game, y'all. Y'all got to give me that. This is something that we got to get into, and little, Hebrew people are talking about this, and that is the Atra Hasis. Now, the Atra Hasis is a stone clay tablet, just like the ones I showed you with the Sumerian kings list, but it's said to be dated at the time of one of Hammurabi's great grandsons. So if that's the case, then it has to be part of a later version of the Sumerian kings list. It couldn't be part of 2600 BC because I just showed you what time Hammurabi lived, and you see right here the grandson lived in 1646 BCE, one of his grandsons. So it just doesn't add up. That's why I believe that the kings list is more recent than they say. Again, it's just to give validity to these people over here. Now, what is the Atra Hasis? Let's read it. Akkadian records in various versions on clay tablets named for its protagonist, Atrahas, who is said to be on the Sumerian kings list. It can be dated to the reign of Hammurabi, his great-grandson, Amini Sadaqwa, 1646 to 1626 BCE, and then this is the bomb right here. A section from the tablet tells the story of the Anunnaki and the other gods they created. It also mentions Allah, for the first time in history, but he's known as a rebellious god of the Igigi, worker gods of the Anunnaki. Now, some of you who are really with me understand what I just said. Some of y'all who are new, again, y'all might get this in the morning or have to do some more research, but this is really, really critical. This is critical to the creation story, or you even using, and no disrespect here, but the name Allah. This is telling you where it comes from, and who Allah was before you even get to Islam. So this is something that was already created, that they kept and they held on during the time of these ancient Babylonian kings and what was going on there. They held on to Allah. But another important thing is the story. We all know about the Anunnaki and heard of that, and people think that the Anunnaki is the story of all of it. These gods, these creator gods. Well, there have always been stories throughout history of gods being before, the people that would come. In South Africa, those humans I talked about in part one, the Adamu, which basically means man or the first man, Adamu, and no wonder how you get Adam later. It's not a coincidence, people, of the jockeying and plagiarism that's going on. But again, Allah in this story, according to the Atra Hasis, which is a real strong clay tablet, Allah is a rebellious god of the Igigi, or the Igigi are the rebellious gods of the Anunnaki, other gods created by them. So Allah is a rebellious god, but we say in Allah in all of this when it comes to Islam. So again, I'm not trying to hate, but I'm just, giving you guys the information that is critical to the story and the backing and the origins of some of this stuff. Now, to back that up, what you could do is go read this book here, which is Oxford. So anything that has to do with Oxford and all of these writers, this is going to be pretty much on point. So this book talks about what I just talked about, the Sumerians kings list. It talks about, the Anunnaki and everything like that. And it also talks about what I just shared with you about Allah being used the first time, way before you get Islam and those people. So it's good in the sense that those people can say, see, we've always been with it. We've always been saying that. But what they're not saying is that the original story of Allah and Atrahas, that's what we need to correct, and that's the missing link of that information. This book details it. The author of this book, I forget her name. Stephanie Bailey. Stephanie Daly. It's right there. She's won all kind of awards. She's a polished scholar and all of that. And again, when you're dealing with Oxford, you can almost take it to the bank. So you guys need to do a little bit of studying. If you want to know about the Anunnaki and that whole Sumerian thing and the holes in that, get this book. So next, you guys also got to understand, again, Kemet, was the blueprint to all of this, and showing people how to live on a higher level and showing more to that. But the issue was that a lot of these Middle Eastern people and all of these scurrier, savages and things like that would become, they would create their own mythos and things like that. And I wanted to point this out because you have a Lotan. Lotan is the servant sea god of Yam, and his history is from the organic Baal cycle. This is Canaanite history, which we also talk about the land of Canaan, all of that being Babylon. Like, all of this stuff goes together. These are all the same people, some of these mythos, but I bring Lotan up because it sounds like Satan and the story, this serpent dragon and things like that, which we are going to get to again, and being there and flooding. Like, you can find these stories in every civilization, but this is the groundwork for the Bible that's going to come later, and as they pull from these stories that they're going to get. And we talk about Baal cycle, which is a vicious cycle that this monster would basically go on. We talk about Baal there, which is another god, or Baal, that is going to be worshipped and deified in the Middle East. So you have all of this going on, and they'll create their own things. And then you also have Tiamat again, and this is just to show you, this is Akkadian, so Canaanite, Akkadian, Babylonian, these little hubs of people, they all are pretty much the same stock, and most of them they're all the same people. They try to break it up, give different certain validities to these people to give them a stake on the religion that they back and everything like that. But again, they're copycats. So you see it right here. So Akkadian, Canaanite, too similar of a word. These are the same people. Tiamat, Lotan, serpent dragons. They're getting all of these stuff from the mythos that we told, and I'm gonna touch on, the serpents and the dragons and the snakes, which we did a little bit, but I got a couple more just to show you, the theft of this stuff. Now, the Hittites. So we get to the Hittite Empire, which again, I told you about the Black Sea flooding and these people taking that story and all of that. This Noah crap would come later, but this area right here, the Hittite kingdom. So again, the Hittites are going to basically rise up and pretty much invade Kemet. Okay, so we're still popping at this time, but you have the Hittites coming in, the savages getting jealous, not being fed right, or what they were getting, they couldn't afford it, eventually getting cut off. You have problems with all these people, unclean, doing different various things that was just not like, the cultures of the Nile Valley. But this is where they come from. So if we know that the history of these people are savage and barbaric, everything after that is going to follow suit, and we're going to prove that, So again, it's just pinpointing, when they came in, before the Hyksos. So the Hittite Empire, 1680. So again, they were at war with Kemet for resources at this time. Things have gone bad. The trading, started to, it was still going, but again, it was different. It was a different time because the people were different, and the more people that you have, the more resources you need, so you get into all of this crazy stuff. And then Hittite mythology. So when they come on the scene and you track this tribe, you have this snake, serpent, dragon, Ilili Unka. It's hard to say, again, the pronunciation, I probably botched it, but Hittite mythology, 1600 BC, serpentine dragon. Again, taking what they got from Canaanite, taking what they got, from Babylonia. Like, they have all of these mythos, and there's no reason why they're similar. And then when you get to the Bible, you have Leviathan, which we're going to touch on, serpent dragons and all of that, recreating and retelling this history for these people. So this is all mythos, folks, but this is where it comes from. This slide here, we talk about the Hyksos, which is basically the Hittite, Canaanite, Babylonian, all that stuff over there, all of the mixture. These are these people that are going to come in and basically go to war again with Kemet. They depicted them here so you can see they invaded in 1650 BC, and they're going to rule for a couple hundred years. They're actually gonna win, because at this time Kemet was again viewed as the center of the world. So you have all these people coming in, staying there, people get married in now and procreating with different women. This is still a high time, but people have different wives. So you take wives of foreign nations. This is what the Bible means when they talk about, the gods would marry men and stuff like that. But those guys that they were talking about were the people who were not like the other people. So that can only be the Africans of the Nile Valley, who were unlike all of the invader tribes that would come in. But yet again, man sees woman, want wives. And oftentimes too, a lot of these tribes, they didn't have anything to trade. So women, they would, trade and sell their women, because they knew that the Nile Valley cultures were more into that, and they could have better use for them than what they could. They needed resources, they need food. So they would do that for trade, and it's crazy. And this is something that is going to rise the European when we get to the Romans and the Greeks and how they treated their women. But the Hyksos, they did the same thing. They had no regard. They did not see the woman as God like we did. These were savage, more patriarchal, backward societies. So nevertheless, they come in, Western Asians, all the foreigners, and you see here, you see the different depictions of the people. Now, I showed you the one earlier where we had nothing but black faces. Now you got black, you got a little yellow black, you got light skinned black, and all of these other different races, but we took it down so the people would know. Now, This is a game changer, and I know a lot of some Hebrew brothers, they would disagree with this, but the Hebrew people, a Hapari Aparu people, which are real tribes, okay, coming from that central area. And if you look here, Habari can be written as Hapiru or Apriru. It means dusty and dirty. Yeah, you think? This term was throughout the Fertile Crescent, described to the peoples who were rebels, outlaws, raiders, mercenaries, bowmen, servants, slaves, and laborers. There it is, people. These are the people that gives you your Hebrews. This is where they get the name from. As again, you add people to the culture. You add different gene pools. You add different thought. Which means different development, different everything. So this is where you're gonna get your Hebrews from. You eventually, I think the language would change, and this is how it would be pronounced over hundreds of years, 50 years to years. How we do slang for things, it was no different back then. So the Habiru, them the Hebrews. you know Put it together, people. And if you see on here, right here, if we look at this Yahweh thing, okay, we're going to get into this. Hyksos equals Hu equals Shu, foreign nomad, okay? Foreign nomad, which were all those people from 1800 BC. Canaanite refugees came, then Jews, not Israelites, and ruled Egypt 107 years from 1630 to 1523. I just told you when they invaded in 1650. But the point is, okay, again, from 1800 BC, Canaanite refugees came then, Jews, not Israelites, and ruled Egypt. So they say Jew back then. That's debatable too. Jews, because again of the pronunciation, which you see right here. Jew, Yahweh eventually gets thrown in there. These languages and these words and these meanings are going to get, mixed up. And again, when you don't have these people writing things down, yet they didn't write anything down. You have the cylinder scrolls in cuneiform, but this part in this area of their whole background in religious practices and things like that, this comes later. And then you have these books here. Again, they wrote books on it from Hebrew to Hebrews. You read this book, again, it basically backs up what I just said and what I showed you of where these people came from. So again, family, just doesn't look good for you Hebrew guys. Now, we get back into a little bit of Egypt stuff. This is depictions of the battle, so you kind of see what's going on there. We talked about it. There's various artwork all around the place showing you the defending of the nation and giving you stories of what we had to do and cut off heads, cut off hands and other body parts and things like that to basically defend the land. So this shows you what was going on and depicting that time. So during the time of the Hyksos reign, you have something that is going to happen. This is the theory that I put together. So you have Apep or Apepi, okay? And Apepi or Apep is a snake, another snake deity who's a serpent. And this is the enemy of Ra, okay? And as you see here on the boat, you have the two guys in the Nenaru fighting the snake of the water. And then you have here in the second picture, this is the cat of Ra cutting off the snake, okay? And it's not ironic, but you have the snake by the tree. Snake, tree, talking snake. You see where I'm going with this? But again, this is on the walls of ancient Kemet, not in the Garden of Eden. So they get a little bit of that from there, but it's way deeper than that. We're going to touch back on that again. The main thing is Apepi is real. Again, the enemy of Ra and somebody he did battle with, which is this snake, this beastly snake. And you're going to have him be the symbol of chaos and destruction. And the Hyksos knew that. And they were learning about some of the deities and what was good, what was bad, and all of that kind of stuff, and would take what they wanted from it. So what you're going to have, Hyksos territory under Pharaoh Apophis, right here, Apophis, which comes out of Apep, Apepi, Apophis, okay? Apophis is going to take that name after the snake that battles Ra, because he is Ra's enemy. So the enemy of Ra, is the enemy of Ra's people. So this is the conquest. So Apophis takes that name. He's a Hyksos. and sits on the throne, 1575 BC. This is where they get that from. So again, worshiping the serpent, but again, he chose to be the evil snake, which there are good snakes in Kemet too. I talked about Wajet, which is the snake on the crown, on the Uraeus, on the Pharaoh's head. That is the good one. That is the protector, But Apepi, again, turns into Apophis. They take that name and run with it. Now, this is critical again for a lot of the Hebrews because, again, we're moving down here to somebody who actually existed. This is Pharaoh Amos, okay? And you had Thutmose coming into around this time and Amos, but it's not crazy that Moses is similar to the name Amos, Moses, Thutmose. You guys hear it. So the creation story, again, backed off of real people, just like when we talked about Hammurabi, and Moses being similar. So again, they find a way to tie all of this in and some of the real, historical events of these people. And then they give you Bible, and saying this is real history, but it's far from it. So Amos comes in the first 1554, basically getting Kemet. The South would come in and aid what was going on in the North. So again, the Sudanese and Ethiopians and all of that, all of Nubia, those places that, basically got united, they would come back in the South and get stronger and battle the Hyksos. And this brother here would wipe them out and get rid of them, and we would take the throne back. So only for a very short time. I think 400 years, two, maybe. That is a lot of time. But when you're talking about people who have thousands and thousands of years of history, that's not that long. So eventually we were able to take it back over, and now you're back under black rule. And this is going to kind of usher in that third golden age, the rebirth. And this is the Per-Him Haru age, which is coming forth by day, or the Book of the Dead. This is when you get, this is when this is coming on. So from after the Karas Sabiat and all of the coffin text stuff, we're going to go into the Per-Him Haru. And now we're writing, again, like I told you, more on papyrus and forming this in a book, version of things like this. So this, I would argue, would be the first or the oldest book. So if this is older than the Bible, which we know, it's older than the Quran, it's older than the Torah, then why aren't we not studying the Per-Him Haru more? Oldest book, So that's a question some of you guys can say this, that, and the third. And again, it's all aliens, these people, stay away from these people. But come on, guys. Let's just be real here. So this is when you're going to get all of these great, texts, coming in, founded by Hatshepsut and Thutmose III, bringing this third golden age upon us. And we're going to get a lot of great things in that. And I like to point out too, if you see in this picture right here at the top right, with the balance of the scales and Anubis and in the weighing the heart and the feather and all of that. This is the time where you're going to get that and get these stories. A lot of you are familiar with that, and being in the judgment hall of Osiris, not the judgment hall of Jesus or whatever they tell you in Chronicles, or First Corinthians. First Corinthians or one of those, whatever they tell you about that story. So this is where they stole it from, being in the judgment hall of Osiris. This is where this comes from, So moving on, we talk about Hatshepsut again, my beautiful black sisters. This is a great one. And the temple of Hatshepsut, 1507, Haru is going to come in. She acquires the throne and basically, does a lot of good things. Hatshepsut was definitely looked up to great. Some people hated her because she was a full-blown female ruler. Some of the female rulers or the queens in the past, they were side by side with the king, but she just inherited by herself, and it was just queen rulership. Her calling most of the shots and doing things like that, and getting this temples built and her burial temple and all of that carved into the mountain. So we went from pyramid building to doing better, mountain carvings, and this is when you get the whole Valley of the Kings and burying the dead in in these specific places, and the Valley of the Queens also too. So you get this time going on during here, this third golden age, and us just kind of revitalize what was lost for those couple hundred years of the Hyksos rulership. So again, great sister here, look her up. She does a lot of good things. I don't have enough time to tell you about all of the things she did here. So then we have the other great rulers that a lot of you know from this time, which Akhenaten comes in, then Tutankhamun, and then Seti the First. These are great suits of this time to bring the blackness back to Kemet that was lost through all of the savagery and all of that, backwards and craziness that was going on. So Akhenaten here, one of my favorites, Tutankhamun. I mean, you can look up all of these great pharaohs here and get great stories about what was going on. And they also were defending Kemet too at this time, because after the invasion, the Hyksos and all those people, they didn't stop. The ones that were still around and trying to, still put together, little hit groups and take over. These guys, they were slaughtering. They weren't having that. So battle was something that was constant. You have to defend the throne. You have to defend your greatness. Now, Temple of Seti here, just to show you that stone structures were still getting built at this time too. Seti is 1290 to 1279 BCE when he ruled. But again, look at all of these great column structures. They started incorporating even more and doing things like that, and really, again, carving into more and more mountains and things like that. You still have pyramid building going on, but they were just on a smaller scale because, again, they were trying to do something different, with them. And we're going to get into that in other presentations. But nevertheless, you have right here, which is one of my favorites. And we all say Ramses or Ramesu the second, but that wasn't his name. His name is Ursa Ma'at Ras and Tepura Ramesu Meriamun. So some of y'all can say that in the morning maybe, but it's a long name. But nevertheless, what was going on, the people that come in and try to rewrite this history, so the savages that are collecting their things and trying to tell their stories, this great Nasut here, they botched his name and they didn't want you to know, the name of him. So this time is a time where you have, some of the Bible chronology really kind of kicking in and saying Moses was learned in the ways of the Egyptians and things like that, but they didn't tell him how to bury the dead. Now, I hope y'all got that, because if you see what we've been going over, structures and things like that, you cannot find it. Biblical history does not back up, physical things that the people did. You can't find the tombs. You can't find anything. Moses know nothing. So that was something that the Egyptians took very, very sacred, burying their dead and the rituals that they went through, mummification. You guys know all of that. Why didn't they teach that to Moses? Why didn't they teach him how to build an obelisk? None of it. So what did they teach him? Obviously nothing, because he never existed. Because if they would have taught him something, we would have saw the remnants of what they taught. Think about that. Again, we have Queen Nefertari, who is Ramses II wife, right here. So this beautiful sister, another queen for my black sisters to go look up, Queen Nefertari. The Nefertari photo that we often see, the popular bust, that's said to be plagiarized and copied. The Egyptian tomb excavator, when he found her tomb and all of that, they repainted that picture after his wife at the time. So that is the big story. The Comet's famous Nefertari bust. So it is the fate of not what she really actually looked like. So we got to be careful with that. But we do have this statue, and you can clearly see this is a sister. Okay, so some of y'all have that tattooed on your body of that bust of Nefertari, but I hate to break it to you, but that might not be legit and what she actually looked like. So this is something that's important, because this was left by, that reign of Akhenaten and and Queen Nefertari. This is the Turin's Kings list, and you can see right here the writing. This is in a museum. Again, Egyptian writing. You can see it clear as day right here. But it is important because later on we're going to talk about a biracial Egyptian, one of the last, true blood from the biracial side. Excuse me, Manetho. Manetho is going to basically put all of the Egyptian so-called dynasties, which are really royal families in the reign of one family, in order for the king who was ruling at that time. And we're going to get into that a little bit later when that takes place. But Manetho uses that chronology of the dynasties rewritten by Akhenaten and not Akhenaten, I'm sorry, but Ramses and Nefertari. So they rewrite the King's List to preserve the history for the. So this is the Turin's King's List, and this is what Manetho is going to use. When it comes hundred years later, this will be preserved, and he'll use that to retell the story. So that pretty much wraps up part 3 of historical origins. I hope you guys learned a lot and got something out of it. Part 4 is going to come out this month, I promise. I'm really involved in a lot of things, and I'm really heavily involved in my community, and we got a lot of things that we're fighting back against here in the neighborhood right now. So I've took it upon myself to do my role and play my part, as well as other works and other studies that I'm into. So these videos take a lot of time, but I do appreciate the people who are getting something out of it. Make sure you like it, make sure you share it, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can be up to date and we can keep going with all of this information. I hope you guys love what I put together for you here in part 3, and part 4 will be on the way because it's Black History Month. So we got to keep going in and just keep reminding ourselves and our children that every day can be Black History Month. Thank you. Be one family.